We have to start right here because what we're witnessing is a political earthquake. It's an explosion in Washington.
It really is. Forget the usual gridlock. This is something else entirely. We're moving into genuine crisis territory.
And we are analyzing a massive amount of source material today that all points to the same conclusion. A political train wreck is happening right now.
And it's one that threatens to just completely upend the balance of power in the U.S. House of Representatives.
So let's get right to the numbers because they are, frankly, stunning. The sources we have confirm this isn't speculation.
No, not at all. This is coming from multiple investigative reports, Puck News being a primary one. And what they're saying is that upwards of 20 Massie Republican Congress members are expected to announce their retirement.
Or in some cases, not even retirement, just outright resignation.
Yes, exactly. Resigning in the coming weeks. Some experts are even saying this could all go down before the new year.
20 members walking out. That's the number you need to focus on because it just immediately tells you how deep the instability runs. It's a systemic threat.
And you have to understand the context here. The current Republican majority in the House is, well, it's razor thin.
It's hanging by a thread on a good day.
It really is. So the loss of 20 members, and you have to remember, many of these are considered safe GOP seats. Well, you do the math.
It's not just a problem for the next election. It mathematically puts their majority in peril right now.
It is an immediate legislative crisis. And so what, for you, the listener, is very, very simple.
It is. If this exodus, this great Massie exodus, picks up speed, that Republican majority just vanishes. It evaporates.
Which then puts an almost unbearable amount of pressure and stress directly on Speaker Mike Johnson, who's already, embattled, to say the least.
And the high-stakes outcome here is the very real possibility, not a theoretical one, of House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries becoming the new Speaker of the House.
In the immediate future, this isn't about 2026, this is about right now, a direct threat to the current legislative balance.
So what's driving this? I mean, when you dig into the internal reports, it's not what you'd think. This isn't about policy disagreements, really.
No, it's far more personal. What we've gleaned from synthesizing all this material is that this is an internal revolt. It's based on a profound sense of disillusionment.
They're not quitting because they lost an election to a Democrat.
Exactly. They're quitting because they feel they're being actively and publicly disrespected. They feel they're being made to look, and these are their words, stupid, by the very regime they are supposed to be serving.
So their entire job, their whole purpose for being in Washington has been reduced to just being a rubber stamp.
A rubber stamp for one single agenda. And while that's happening, all the critical issues that affect your daily life, housing, affordability, economic stability, they're just treated as irrelevant distractions.
So they're literally sacrificing their careers. They're giving up power to escape what they see as a daily humiliation. Okay, let's unpack that, this reality of a massive political exodus. The confirmation from multiple lawmakers and their senior aides, that's what makes this so critical.
Right. This isn't just, Capitol Hill gossip. It's not chatter from the rumor mill. These are people making career-ending decisions based on what they are seeing inside the building every single day.
It points to a complete and total breakdown of morale, a loss of faith in the entire party structure as it currently exists.
And we have to remember, these are often safe seats. These aren't swing districts where they're expecting a tough fight.
No, these are positions that traditionally give you significant influence, a steady income, the power to actually shape policy for the country.
To just abandon that suggests the environment inside the party has become so toxic, so professionally unbearable, that it's just not worth it anymore.
So what is it? What specifically is freaking out these Massie Republicans so much that they're running for the exits? The sources point to this mix of internal humiliation and a very real external dread about the voters.
That external dread, it all starts with the polling data. Donald Trump's approval numbers, you look across all the recent polls, especially in those crucial swing states, the suburban areas, they're plummeting.
And if you're a legislator who has staked your entire career, your whole political identity on being loyal to him, that's not just a national trend you can ignore.
It's a direct threat to your own survival. Your local viability is suddenly in question. The loyalty that was demanded of you is no longer a political shield. In fact, it's becoming an anchor.
The regime demands total fealty, but that fealty is now creating enormous political risk for them back home.
And it's not just polls. The sources point to specific recent election results that were like alarm bells going off all over the country.
We're not talking about the general election.
Yeah.
These are the off-year elections. in key states too, Virginia, New Jersey, Georgia.
And those results, they signaled a really serious systemic problem for the party. In Virginia, you saw these major legislative flips to the Democrats. And it was directly attributable to the Massie brand driving away those suburban voters.
And New Jersey was much tighter than anyone expected.
Right. And maybe the most concerning signal of all was a recent congressional special election. This was in a district that should have been totally secure, a GOP stronghold.
And the Massie candidate won, but only barely, by a single-digit margin.
Exactly. So if you're a Congress member sitting in a district that you used to win by 20 points, a total lock, and now you see your brand just barely squeaking out a win.
Your whole political calculation just changes overnight.
Completely.
Yeah.
You start to realize you might be next on the chopping block. And not because of anything you did wrong, but because of the national headwinds created by the party's leadership and its focus.
So why stick around? Why wait to be sacrificed in the next election cycle?
It's an impossible squeeze. You've got the fear of being primaried from the right by someone even more extreme, and at the same time, the fear of losing to a moderate Democrat in the general election because you've become too toxic for the center.
But that's only half of it, isn't it? The fear of losing is one thing. The other half is what's happening inside the building, this rubber stamp reality, the sense of professional betrayal.
Yes. And we have some really specific, really biting quotes from the sources that detail this professional indignity.
Thomas Massie, for example. He's often seen as part of that fiscal conservative wing, and he really sums up the core complaint.
He does. He points out that these are smart people. They gave up a tremendous amount to get to Congress. They sacrificed successful careers in the private sector. They sacrificed time with their families. They gave up normal lives.
All because they believed they were coming to Washington to actually legislate, to influence policy, to represent their districts in a meaningful way.
And what did they find when they got there? According to Massie and others who are speaking anonymously, their job has been completely hollowed out.
Their role is just to show up, vote how they're told, and, quote, rubber stamp whatever Donald Trump wants.
They feel that the legislative branch, which, is supposed to be a co-equal branch of government, has been totally subjugated to the will of one person and his inner circle.
So that whole sense of professional purpose, it's just gone, evaporated. These are highly intelligent, ambitious people who feel like their intellect is not just ignored, but actively devalued.
And that's where Massie's analogy lands with such brutal force. He's the one who says a monkey could do this job.
A monkey could do this job. I mean, what a thing for a sitting congressman to say about his own role.
Because if the only requirement is unquestioning loyalty, just pressing the yay or nay button as instructed, then what's the point? Your entire purpose for being there is gone. It's not about serving your constituents anymore. It's not about good policy.
It's no wonder they feel, and again, this is a direct quote, that the regime is disrespecting them and making them all look stupid each and every day.
The regime demands this total personal subservience, but that subservience is now costing them everything. It's eroding their political safety, and it's eroding their personal and professional pride.
So they're quitting.
Yeah.
They're quitting because they just can't justify the personal cost of the humiliation anymore. The system has stopped valuing their minds and only values their obedience.
And if that was about the professional and political reasons for leaving, this next part, this gets into the really personal, cynical, and frankly, toxic atmosphere that's driving the rot from within.
This is about the total collapse of sincerity. The idea that what you see is not at all what you get.
And this whole section is really driven by these just jaw-dropping comments that are attributed in the sources to Marjorie Taylor Greene, the MTG revelation, as it's being called.
She provides this incredibly inflammatory, but also highly credible, look inside the machine. It just highlights the profound hypocrisy that seems to define Congress right now.
MTG's core claim is that there is this massive gulf, a chasm of integrity between what her Massie colleagues do in private and what they present as their public face.
She says explicitly that these members secretly hate and mock Donald Trump behind his back.
Think about that. They're engaged in this constant, exhausting, two-faced performance.
So in private conversations in the cloakrooms, they make fun of him. They express their actual disdain for his policies, for his personal behavior.
But the second a camera is on, the second they step out into the hallway or onto cable news, they instantly put on the MAGA hat and become his most loyal, most ardent public defenders.
It's a spectacle of political cynicism that is, it's hard to find a parallel for it in recent history.
It truly is. They're wearing the uniform of absolute loyalty while secretly harboring this intense personal resentment and professional contempt. It's a constant, active betrayal of their own convictions, all for the sake of political survival.
And according to MTG, why do they do it? Why this massive two-faced performance?
Her answer is blunt. She says they're simply too weak and pathetic to admit it publicly.
So they sell out their constituents, they sell out their own professional pride, they sell out their supposed ideological beliefs, all to maintain this illusion of loyalty.
Even though they recognize the absurdity of it, they see the damage it's causing, but they feel trapped, unable to break free from the system that demands it.
And this internal weakness, this hypocrisy, it has real-world consequences for policy, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. According to the sources, MTG connects this personal failing directly to some very dangerous legislative outcomes, particularly in foreign policy.
She's the one who calls them Putin bootlickers.
Yes. She links these members directly to that term because she believes their unquestioning obedience means that the policy messages coming out of this faction start to look an awful lot like Russia's security strategy.
That is just a staggering accusation. To have that coming from inside the Republican Party, suggesting that the pressure for total loyalty has actually compromised U.S. foreign policy.
That they are echoing geopolitical narratives that originate in Russia, simply because that narrative happens to align with what the leader wants at that particular moment.
This is the critical point, isn't it? The private contempt translates directly into public legislative failure. If they don't have the strength to stand up to him over a personal insult, how can anyone trust them to stand up to him on critical decisions about national security or defense?
And MTG takes it even further. She uses this deeply disturbing personal anecdote to illustrate the dark, transactional nature of this internal power struggle. And this is essential if you want to understand the ultimate betrayal that's driving some of these members out the door.
She talks about a profound conflict of values.
She does. She says that she was standing up for women who were raped when they were 14 years old, supporting legislation to protect them. But in response, she claims the Trump regime actively fought against her.
Fought against her and, she alleges, issued death threats.
Yes. And she believes they did this because they were trying to protect powerful people in the Epstein files.
Just pause and think about the implication of that accusation. The charge is that the loyalty regime isn't about conservative goals or moral values. It's about protecting a specific class of powerful men, no matter what they've done.
Her quoted frustration is so raw, she asks, "You want to protect the powerful men, the hell are you talking about?" It just perfectly captures the sense of philosophical betrayal.
It reframes the entire conflict. It's not about Magyar versus traditional conservatism anymore.
No, it becomes a battle between what some see as true conservative principles, like protecting the innocent, and this dark reality of protecting the ruling class and the leader's powerful friends.
And for any lawmaker who came to Washington to fight corruption, to defend vulnerable people, to realize you're now being forced to shield alleged abusers in high places.
That's the ultimate non-negotiable betrayal. That makes the job completely untenable. That's the moment you realize the rubber stamp extends even to the deepest moral compromises.
We've laid out the political and the psychological reasons for this mass defection. But now we have to pivot from the Washington drama to the issues that are directly affecting you, the listener.
Because the party's failure to even address these issues is, I think, the primary reason they're facing this kind of electoral backlash. The scale of the political failure becomes catastrophic when you put it next to the economic reality for most Americans.
And we have to start with the context, which is grim. Let's call it the layoff tsunami. The latest data is deeply, deeply concerning.
It is. U.S. layoffs are currently on track to exceed the levels we saw during the Great Financial Crisis.
Just that comparison alone should be a massive alarm bell. We're not talking about a minor market correction here.
The data we've analyzed is just so clear. Layoffs are up a staggering 54% year over year. That's a total of well over 1.1 million already.
And based on the current pace of announcements from major companies, the projections suggest that number is going to climb. It'll probably be closer to 2 million layoffs for the year once all the data is in.
And that's across the board. Massive cuts in tech, in finance, in media. This is the reality for so many working Americans right now. They are struggling just to live paycheck to paycheck.
And a rapidly growing number aren't even getting that paycheck at all. The underlying economic pressure is just immense.
And it reinforces that feeling that so many people have, that the rich are getting richer, while the majority are just dealing with this constant psychological and financial strain.
So in an environment like this, one so economically stressed, You would think that affordability, the ability to buy a home, pay your rent, afford groceries, that it would be the number one uncontested legislative priority.
You would think so. And we actually have a voice of reality from inside the party who confirms this. Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick.
A more moderate voice, it's worth noting.
A more moderate voice, yes. And he states it very clearly. He says affordability is issue number one, and it trumps everything else. For him, this is the fundamental electoral and moral imperative.
He talks about the reality he hears every single day when he goes back to his district. For most people living paycheck to paycheck, if you can't afford to make ends meet, nothing else matters other than that.
Right. National security is important, foreign policy is important, but if your family can't put food on the table or keep a roof over your head, there's only one issue: affordability.
He says, I hear it every day back home. It's real. And that is the job of a representative, right?
Mm-hmm.
To translate the real pain of your constituents into a legislative priority.
But this is where you see the catastrophic gulf, the disconnect, because the message coming from the party's leader, Donald Trump, in that same week was to call affordability a Democratic scam.
A scam. How does a congressman who hears that pain every day reconcile his own leader, dismissing it as a political fabrication?
Well, you can see how difficult it is. Fitzpatrick's response was, well, it was visibly uncomfortable and very telling. He had to put out this carefully worded statement saying he doesn't know what Trump was intending with that comment.
But he felt he had to insist that the issue is real. And that's the whole conflict in a nutshell. The reality-based congressman says it's real, while the party leader says it's a scam.
It perfectly illustrates why these members feel they're being made to look stupid. They are forced to carry a message that directly contradicts the suffering they see with their own eyes in their own districts.
And the spin just doesn't work when you look at the stats. We analyzed the messaging from the Trump regime's Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, and he really struggled to justify this dismissal of affordability concerns.
His attempt was so weak, he tried to blame it all on media coverage of the Biden years. He was basically suggesting that Americans only think they're struggling because the media told them to.
Which is incredibly insulting to anyone actually living that reality.
It is. And he was then forced to admit the inconvenient truth, which is that real incomes, when you adjust for the incredible inflation of the last few years, are only up by about 1%.
1%. That's a rounding error compared to the cost increases in housing and healthcare and just about everything else.
And the polling data that was cited in that same interview, it just confirms how badly their messaging has failed. A massive 60% of Americans polled feel President Trump actively makes prices and inflation sound better than they really are.
So there's a fundamental distrust of their whole economic narrative. His approval on the economy is low, 36%, and it drops even further to 32% when you ask specifically about inflation.
People are feeling the pain, and they are actively rejecting the spin that tries to tell them that pain isn't real.
And to see this disconnect even more clearly, you just have to look at the messaging from someone like Senator McCormick, who's pushing this train wreck narrative.
Right. He describes the economy they inherited as a train wreck, out of control inflation, an enormous regulatory state. It sets them up to be the heroes who came in to fix it all.
And McCormick's message now is that they've made progress. Inflation's cut in half. Real wages are now growing faster than inflation. They claim they're putting money back in the pockets of working families.
The narrative is simple. We inherited a disaster, we've made things better, but there's still more work to do.
But that whole narrative rests on a complete misrepresentation of the economy they actually inherited. The sources we looked at are very clear on this.
They are. The previous administration handed them what the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, The Economist, they all called it a Goldilocks economy. Not too hot, not too cold.
Unemployment was near record lows. 16 million jobs have been created. To call that a train wreck it's not just spin.
It's a foundational lie. And it disconnects their entire policy prescription from reality. And this is the core betrayal for you, the listener. When the political premise about the economy is demonstrably false, the policies that come from it will inevitably fail to meet your actual needs, which leads right back to why those 20 members are quitting. They're being forced to defend a lie that is actively hurting their own constituents. And if you want the most undeniable black and white evidence of this chasm between rhetoric and action, you look at the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA.
This bill, or more importantly, what was stripped out of this bill, reveals the party's true priorities in the starkest possible terms.
Let's just start with the top line number to anchor the conversation. The bill authorizes $900 billion in military spending.
$900 billion. Nearly $1 trillion for the defense budget at the exact same time Americans are dealing with mass layoffs, losing health care, and facing an impossible housing market.
The bill itself is a monster. It's 3,086 pages long. And there's a small but significant detail in there. It keeps the name Department of Defense, which is a quiet rejection of the leader's preferred, more aggressive label, Department of War.
But the sheer size of the bill, it masks the really critical and in some cases truly cruel decisions about what was actively taken out.
This is where the ideological purity test just completely overrode the practical human needs of the very people they claim to support and revere, our military service members.
And the most shocking example is the active removal of IVF treatment coverage for military members trying to start a family.
And let's be very clear about the rationale here. This wasn't a budget cut. The reason this family-building benefit was removed was purely ideological.
MAGA Republicans, with Speaker Mike Johnson leading the charge, view in vitro fertilization, IVF, as against the will of God. They've publicly labeled it murder.
So they imposed their specific, narrow religious belief onto the entire defense budget. They used a military spending bill as an ideological weapon against their own troops.
The contradiction is just screaming from the page. We have $900 billion for advanced weapons, for global readiness, for defense contracts.
But we are actively depriving the men and women who serve, many of whom struggle with fertility because of combat stress or deployment schedules, of a basic, essential family-building benefit.
We'll send them into harm's way, but we will deny them the chance to have a family because of a narrow theological stance. It's just stunning.
And the betrayals didn't end there. Other crucial measures, things designed to help everyday Americans with the economic crisis we just talked about, they were also removed, specifically the Road to Housing Act.
And removing the housing bill is just so devastating because it directly contradicts what Congressman Fitzpatrick said, that affordability is issue number one.
The Road to Housing Act wasn't some minor proposal. It was a comprehensive bipartisan bill designed to tackle the catastrophic national housing crisis head-on.
It was a serious piece of legislation. It had provisions to increase housing supply, to enhance affordability by reforming zoning laws, to boost low-income housing tax credits.
It was designed to make a massive positive difference in the lives of millions of people who are struggling with rents they can't afford and home prices that are completely out of reach.
And despite the undeniable need for housing help, a need that cuts across every single demographic, this critical bill was not included.
The message couldn't be clearer. The leadership prioritized huge military spending and ideological purity tests over helping Americans find a safe, affordable place to live.
There was a third significant removal, too: protections for collective bargaining within the Department of Defense.
And that hits another key constituency very hard. Union members, particularly those who are sometimes called unions for Trump supporters.
The sources we have offer a very harsh critique of that support. They essentially say that being a union member who supports Trump is like being unions for stupid.
They point to his entire history. His public life is defined by saying, "You're fired," by bankrupting businesses, by being fundamentally anti-collective bargaining. Removing these protections is completely consistent with his record, but it is a profound betrayal of his union base.
And finally, we have to talk about the internal GOP fight over the central bank digital currency ban, the CBDC, because it says so much about the speaker's weakness and the chaos he's trying to manage.
Right. So for you, the listener, a quick bit of context. A CBDC is basically a digital dollar issued and controlled directly by the Federal Reserve, not by commercial banks.
And the hardliners in the House GOP see this as an existential threat to financial freedom and privacy.
Exactly. They fear it would give the government unprecedented surveillance and control over your personal spending. It's a classic fear of government overreach.
So they demanded that a ban on the Fed ever issuing a CBDC be included in the NDAA. And Speaker Mike Johnson had reportedly lied to them back in July. He promised he would add the ban to the bill to get their votes.
But when the final 3,086-page bill came out, the ban was gone. It was left out.
Which created immediate and severe internal fallout for Johnson. He's caught between two completely contradictory demands.
On one side, you have the hardliners demanding ideological purity. On the other, you have the regime leader himself. The irony here is just perfect.
Because Donald Trump, reportedly due to his own substantial crypto holdings and his desire to keep that community happy, actually supports a central bank digital currency.
So the speaker is trapped. He's caught between the ideology of his caucus and the personal financial interests of the leader who gave him his power. Johnson's failure to deliver on this promised ban just highlights his weakness and fuels even more internal resentment. It's the perfect picture of a party in total disarray.
So we move from legislative hypocrisy to an imminent real-world threat, a looming healthcare disaster that is going to impact tens of millions of Americans. We have to talk about the danger around the Affordable Care Act, the ACA subsidies.
This is a crisis point with a very, very fast approaching deadline. The current lock-in for ACA exchange plans is on the brink of expiring.
And if those subsidies, the financial help that makes the plans affordable, aren't extended quickly, well, we're counting down the days to a complete expiration.
The result will be tens of millions of Americans either facing catastrophic financial hardship or just losing their health insurance entirely.
Let's just quantify that impact. The sources suggest that if these subsidies disappear, a typical middle-class family on the exchange could see their monthly premiums just skyrocket.
We're talking hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars more per year. This isn't a theoretical problem down the road. This is immediate, severe financial pain for families just trying to stay covered.
And the irony is just dripping from this. The Massie regime has claimed for years they have a plan to replace the ACA. But as the sources note with some biting cynicism, they have never introduced a plan.
Not one. So they're letting the clock run out on the current system without offering any functional alternative, which is exactly why people are struggling and why someone like Congressman Fitzpatrick insists that affordability is the number one issue.
This kind of intentional legislative brinksmanship has actually created a pretty significant division inside the Republican Party on whether to extend these subsidies.
It has, and we have a very candid prediction on this from Congressman Grothman, who's not someone easily swayed by political theater.
And he believes that if a clean vote on extending the subsidies actually makes it to the House floor before the end of the year, something Speaker Johnson is reportedly trying everything he can to block.
He believes it will pass with bipartisan support.
That analysis reveals this fundamental split between a rigid leadership that's obsessed with ideology and the rank-and-file members who are actually listening to their constituents.
Democrats only need 3 or 4 Republican votes to get this done, and Grothman's prediction confirms there are more than enough members willing to side with what the people want and keep healthcare covered, rather than towing the leadership's ideological line.
It just starkly reveals that all the chaos, the looming deadline, the threat of people losing their coverage, it's all artificial.
It's manufactured by a leadership that is actively trying to block a measure that has overwhelming support, even from within its own party's base.
Okay, let's conclude with what might be the most extreme example of this disconnect. The regime's isolationist and, frankly, race-based policies. This one demonstrates just how far their ideology is from American public opinion.
We're talking about their refugee policy. The stated plan of the regime is to only accept white South Africans as refugees.
And this policy is based entirely on a fake conspiracy, the idea that there's an active genocide against white Afrikaners in South Africa.
A claim that has been demonstrably proven false. It's been repeatedly debunked by every major international human rights organization.
So the political rationale is just based on paranoia and racial grievance. It's completely detached from reality or any kind of humanitarian need. But the real question is, how does this view play with the actual American public?
And on this, we have clear, overwhelming polling data from YouGov. The vast majority of Americans fundamentally, completely disapprove of this targeted, race-based refugee policy.
The YouGov poll is definitive. It's staggering, really.
Yeah.
97% of Americans disapprove of the policy to only accept white South Africans.
We'll almost never see a consensus number like that in modern American politics. Only a tiny fringe, 3% of Americans, support accepting only white South Africans.
And in contrast, 53% support the traditional, inclusive American approach of accepting refugees from a variety of countries based on their need, not their race.
And this final data point, it just highlights the profound widening chasm that we've been tracing this whole time. When your political leadership is pushing a policy based on a fake conspiracy that 97% of the nation rejects,
You are operating completely outside the realm of public consensus and reality.
it is the ultimate illustration of how isolated, how extreme, and how disconnected the regime's priorities are from the people they claim to represent. Which is ultimately why 20 of their colleagues are ready to just get up and walk away.
So we spent this time tracing the deep systemic consequences of this political instability. We've tried to move past the daily drama to focus on what this chaos actually costs Americans.
And we covered 3 major simultaneous crises. First, the political instability itself, the fact that 20 intelligent members are ready to bail because they feel professionally neutered.
Which would reduce the majority to just a single seat and raise the very real possibility of the opposition taking the gavel.
Second, we explored that crushing economic struggle of the American worker, defined by soaring layoffs and housing shortages, only to have the party leader dismiss the reality of affordability as nothing more than a scam, a total betrayal of his own base.
And third, we detailed the legislative betrayals right inside that $900 billion defense bill, stripping essential human benefits like IVF coverage from our military based on a narrow religious ideology, while actively ignoring a bipartisan bill to solve the national housing crisis.
So after synthesizing this really shocking stack of data, what's the ultimate conclusion for you, the listener? We have to pose that final critical question. It's about the accountability deficit in Washington.
When you have congressional members openly admitting that they are acting as a rubber stamp for a leader they secretly despise.
And when their official policy actions, stripping IVF, ignoring housing, blocking healthcare subsidies, when those actions directly contradict what a 97% consensus of Americans is demanding.
What is the long-term price that's paid by the constituents for this kind of political weakness, this cynicism, and this institutional chaos?
The central damning theme that runs through all of these sources is the disconnect, this deepening, widening chasm between what the American people desperately need right now, affordability, healthcare stability, housing, and what the political regime is actually prioritizing.
What they're prioritizing is loyalty, ideological purity tests, and protecting powerful men.
You're watching a legislative machine seize up under the weight of its own cynical self-interest. So the final thought we want to leave you with is this, and it's built on these two competing realities we've explored today.
If the party continues to prioritize its own internal loyalty over the external pain of their constituents, which of these two crises is going to hit Washington first? The deepening financial agony that's crippling the American worker, or the political collapse that finally forces the loyalists out and costs the party its majority?